Welcome to the last part of Module 1. So far, we have talked about how design is changing. We have talked about the role of the modern designer. And we have confronted the demons, right, that can stop you from moving forward. Fear, resistance, imposter syndrome, comparison, shiny object syndrome, arrogance. But recognizing these demons is not enough. You can understand everything you have learned so far and still remain exactly the same. You can understand that design is changing. You can understand that your role is becoming larger. You can name every negative thing that's stopping you and still be controlled by them because knowledge is not transformation. Knowing what is happening inside you is only the beginning. The real question is this: what do you do when you understand the right path, but you don't feel like you are walking it, right? What do you do when the excitement disappears? What do you do when your progress is slower than you expect? And this happens to a lot of people. And what do you do when the person you want to become feels completely different from the person you are today, right? That is what this final part of Module 1 is about. Not who you are becoming. Transformation rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. Most of the time, it looks ordinary. It looks like returning to the work. It looks like making another attempt, right? It looks like never giving up. It looks like keeping a promise that nobody else knows you made, right? It looks like continuing after the emotion that started you has disappeared. And that is the process we are going to explore now. First, we'll talk about failure, and then we'll talk about your emotions. Then we need to confront the illusion that the person you are today is somehow your final form. And finally, we need to talk about the force that turns intention into identity: discipline. But not discipline as punishment, right? Discipline is very misunderstood. I'm talking about discipline as freedom, as peace, as something sweet, right? So let's begin. Lesson 1.13: The gift of failure. Failure is usually presented as the opposite of success. You either succeed or you fail. You either prove that you are capable or you prove that you are not. But that is not how meaningful work develops. Failure is not always the end of the process. Very often, failure is the process revealing something that you could not see before, right? It shows you where your judgment was weak, where your assumptions were wrong, where your perception was incomplete, where your execution did not match your ambition, right? And where the work still needs to grow, basically. That is the gift, not the pain itself, not the embarrassment, not the disappointment. The gift is in the information that becomes available to you after reality answers you, basically, right? Because before you attempt something, much of what you believe is still theoretical. You believe the idea will work. You believe the client will understand it. You believe the audience will respond. You believe the product is useful. You believe you are ready. Then reality gives you an answer. Sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no. And sometimes failure reveals weaknesses that confidence can hide. But failure is not automatically valuable. You can fail repeatedly and learn nothing, right? You can make the same mistake for 10 years and call it experience. Failure only becomes useful when you examine it honestly, right? When you ask, what actually happened? What part was under my control? What did I misunderstand? What did I avoid? What should I repeat? What needs change, right? Without reflection, failure is only pain. With reflection, failure becomes data. A designer might present a concept that the client rejects. The easiest reaction is to say the client has no taste. Sometimes the client may be wrong, but that cannot be your automatic conclusion. Maybe the concept was not connected clearly enough to the strategy. Maybe the presentation focused on what the design looked like, but not why the decisions were made. Maybe the work solved a problem that the client did not believe they had, right? Maybe the direction was strong, but your explanation was weak. Or maybe the work was simply not good enough, right? That possibility is uncomfortable. I understand that. But it is useful because once the problem becomes visible, it becomes something you can improve. You can improve the work, you can improve the process, you can improve the presentation, you can improve how you qualify clients, you can improve how you define the problem before designing. Failure gives you something specific to work with. Success, on the other hand, does not always do that. Sometimes you succeed without fully understanding why. Maybe the timing was right, maybe the client was easy, maybe the audience was already interested, maybe the project was smaller than expected, right? You succeed, but you learn very little. Failure often forces a deeper investigation. It makes you look at the machinery, right? It basically exposes the gap between what you intended and what actually happened. And that gap is where growth begins. You also need to understand that failure does not always mean that the direction was wrong. Sometimes the direction was right, but the execution was weak, right? Sometimes the execution was strong, but the timing was wrong. Sometimes the timing was right, but the audience was wrong. Sometimes you did everything reasonably well, and the outcome still did not go your way. You need enough honesty to accept responsibility. But you also need enough judgment not to turn every bad outcome into self condemnation, right? A failed project does not mean that you are a failure. A rejected proposal does not mean that you cannot sell. A bad design does not mean that you are not a designer. A product that nobody buys does not mean that you are incapable of building something valuable, right? It means that this attempt did not produce the outcome you wanted. And yeah, that is painful, right? But it's specific, and specific problems can be studied. The danger is when you turn an event into an identity, right? The proposal failed. So you go and say, I'm bad at business, right? That's your conclusion. Or the design was rejected and you say, I am a terrible designer, I have no talent. The launch was disappointing. So you say, nobody cares about what I create. Now the failure is not longer something that just happened, right? It becomes a story about who you think you are. And once it becomes identity, you stop experimenting, you stop taking risks, you begin protecting yourself from evidence, right? You choose smaller goals, you hide the work, you keep fake preparing because preparation feels safer than judgment. But avoiding failure also means avoiding the information required to improve. You cannot become good at something while remaining completely protected from being bad at it, right? That doesn't work like that. You cannot become a confident presenter without giving presentations that feel uncomfortable. You cannot become good at selling without hearing no. You cannot become a director without making decisions that may turn out to be wrong, right? You need to take risks. The goal is not to eliminate failure, okay? The goal is to make failure survivable, useful, and increasingly intelligent. You want better failures, smaller failures, earlier failures, failure that reveals the weaknesses before the cost becomes enormous, right? That is one of the reasons why prototypes are valuable. A prototype basically allows an idea to fail before you spend months building it, right? A conversation can reveal that a client is wrong for you before you sign the contract. A rough concept can expose a weak direction before you polish 20 screens. A small experiment can test demand before you build the entire product, right? Good process does not mean failure, okay? It brings failure forward while it is still cheap enough to learn from. This is specifically important when working with artificial intelligence, right? AI can help you produce faster, but the speed also allows you to produce mistakes faster. You can generate an interface that looks convincing but solves the wrong problem. You can create polished copy that says nothing. You can build a working product based on weak assumptions, right? The output can look finished before the thinking is finished. That is dangerous, right? Because polished failure is harder to recognize. The work looks real, the system works, the page is beautiful, but the underlying decision may still be wrong. So you must remain willing to test, to question, to discard, to rebuild. Basically, the faster tools become, the less attached you should become to the first answer. Okay? Failure also teaches humility. Not humiliation, but humility, right? The recognition that you can, be intelligent, experienced, prepared, and still be wrong. That your taste level doesn't make you invincible. That your experience does not place you above feedback. That confidence is not certainty. This kind of humility protects you from arrogance, right? It allows you to listen without collapsing, to receive criticism without accepting every criticism blindly, right? To change your mind without believing that you have lost your identity, and to admit that something did not work without believing that everything is lost. The strongest people are not those who never fail, right? They are the people who can remain honest while failing. They do not need to distort reality to protect themselves. They can say, this did not work, right? This part was my responsibility. This is what I learned. And this is what I will do differently next time. That is strength. So when something fails, do not only ask, how do I make this feeling disappear, right? Ask, what is this trying to teach me? What assumption was exposed? What weakness became visible, right? What needs to change in my process? And what part of this should I carry into the next attempt? And do not worship failure, okay? Do not romanticize it. Failure can be expensive, it can hurt people, it can cost time, money, trust, and opportunity. The objective is not to fail as much as possible, right? The objective is to learn as much as possible from the failures that you cannot avoid, because you will fail. You will misunderstand things, you will ship work that is not ready, you will trust the wrong person, you will miss opportunities, you will sometimes disappoint yourself. That is part of building anything real. The question is not whether failure will visit you, because it will. The question is what will it leave behind? Bitterness, fear, or information, humility, better judgment, a stronger process. Failure takes something from you, but if you examine it carefully, it can also leave you with something valuable. That is the gift of failure. And once you understand that, the next challenge is learning how to continue even when your emotions are telling you to stop. Lesson 1.14: Emotions and the happiness threshold. Most people organize their lives around a question they rarely notice themselves asking: how do I feel today? Do I feel creative? Do I feel confident? Do I feel motivated? Do I feel ready? Right? And if the answer is no, they delay the work. They wait for a better emotional state, if you will. They wait until they feel inspired. They wait until they believe in themselves again. But your emotions were never designed to be a reliable production schedule, because they change. Sometimes because something happened, something important happened. Sometimes because you slept badly. Sometimes because someone criticized you. Sometimes because you compared yourself to somebody else online. And sometimes for no reason you can clearly explain. Your emotions are real, but they are not always instructions, right? Think of emotions as information. Fear might be telling you that something matters, right? Frustration might be telling you that there is a gap between your current ability and your ambition, okay? And there is nothing wrong with that, okay? Envy might reveal something you secretly want, right? Boredom might tell you that the novelty has disappeared. These signals can teach you something, but they cannot be allowed to make every decision. An emotion can sit in the room, but it cannot always be given the steering wheel. It's like you can feel afraid and still send those cold emails. You can feel insecure and still share the work. You can feel uninspired and still open Figma. You can feel confused and still take the next clear step. You can feel behind and still continue. This does not mean suppressing your emotions, right? It does not mean pretending that everything is fine. It means recognizing the difference between experiencing an emotion and surrendering your direction to it. One of the most important abilities you can develop is the ability to say, I feel this, but I already decided what I'm going to do, and then do it. That sentence is powerful because it separates your state, your current state, from your direction. Your state can change, your direction remains, right? This matters because the work will not always feel good. In the beginning, a new project is exciting, right? The possibilities are open, the references are beautiful. You imagine what the finished work could become. Then you enter the middle, and the middle is rarely exciting, right? The concept, is not working yet, or maybe the typography feels wrong. The client changes something, or maybe they are not very excited about how the project is going yet. Maybe the code breaks, or you start questioning the entire direction, right? The project that made you feel inspired 3 days ago now makes you not want to even log in into your computer. Nothing necessarily went wrong, right? You simply enter the part where inspiration is not longer enough. This is where many people escape, right? They start another project, they download another tool, they watch another tutorial, they decide that the original idea was not good enough, right? But often the idea did not fail, right? So what happened? The emotion changed. The feeling of possibility was replaced by the discomfort of execution. And because they believe good work should feel good all the time while they are making it, they interpret the discomfort as a warning stop. But it's not always a warning. Sometimes discomfort is simply evidence that the work has become real. Now, let's talk about the happiness threshold. So, you probably have something in your mind right now that you believe will finally make you feel successful. Your first client, your first major project, your first five-figure project, maybe your first award, your first employee, your first product launch, right? You imagine reaching it. And you imagine that once you reach it, you will feel different permanently, right? You will not feel like an imposter anymore, right? You will finally feel confident. You will finally feel like you have made it. Then you reach that milestone, and for a moment, it feels incredible. maybe for several days or even months sometimes, maybe for, I don't know, like for a year or something. But eventually something strange happens. It becomes normal. Basically, the thing you once dreamed about becomes part of your ordinary life, and your mind creates a new threshold. Now you need a larger project, a larger audience, a larger income, right? A more impressive client, a more ambitious product. The finish line moves. Now, imagine somebody who does not have much disposable income. They have been waiting for months for a new video game, right? They save for it, they think about it, and finally they buy it. Now, imagine an extremely wealthy person buying a Ferrari, okay? The two purchases are not remotely equal in price, but the difference in joy may not reflect the difference in cost. The person buying the video game may feel just as excited, as the person buying the Ferrari, perhaps even more excited. And that's because happiness does not increase proportionally with price, right? You do not experience a purchase only according to its objective value. You experience it relative to your normal life, okay? Relative to what you already have, relative to what you expect, relative to what once felt difficult or impossible for you. For someone who has never owned a car, buying a reliable second-hand car might feel like extraordinary. For someone who already owns like 10 luxury cars, the 11th may produce excitement for a few days before just becoming part of the collection. Basically, the threshold has moved. This is not because the wealthy person is incapable of happiness. It is because human beings adapt, right? What once was exceptional gradually becomes normal, and once it becomes normal, the mind, begins searching for the next exceptional thing. The Ferrari becomes the baseline. Then it needs to be a more exclusive Ferrari, a larger house, a more expensive experience, right? A more impressive number. Basically, the object changes, but the emotional pattern remains. That is why the next achievement cannot permanently rescue you, right? You can keep increasing the price of the reward without proportionally increasing your ability to enjoy it. Psychologists often describe part of this process as hedonic adaptation. People become accustomed to improvements in their circumstances, right? The ability to adapt is not entirely negative. It helps human beings survive difficult experiences, but it also means that achievement cannot permanently carry your emotional life. The next milestone will not rescue you from being human. You will still have difficult mornings. You will still experience doubt. You will still compare yourself to others sometimes. You will still encounter work that exposes the limits of your ability, and you will still need to decide what to do next. Lesson 1.15: The End of History Illusion. There is a sentence that people often use that sounds harmless but can become incredibly destructive. This is just who I am. I'm not disciplined, I'm not technical, I'm bad at presenting, I'm not a confident person, I'm not a leader, I'm not naturally creative, I always procrastinate. These statements sound like descriptions, but often they behave like prisons, right? They take a temporary pattern and turn it into a permanent identity. They take your current evidence and treat it like the final conclusion. But the person you are today is not the conclusion of your life. You know this because you are already a different person from the person you were like 10 years ago. Your priorities have changed. Your taste has changed, right? Your relationships have changed. Your understanding of the world has changed. Things that once frightened you might now feel ordinary. Things you once valued might no longer matter to you, right? You have already changed in ways your past self could not fully predict because it's impossible to predict the future like that. And yet, when you imagine your future, you probably imagine a slightly modified version of who you are now. You imagine having more money, maybe more skill, more recognition, perhaps a different home or a different job. But even when you imagine a different future, you probably imagine yourself remaining mostly the same. Researchers call this tendency the end of history illusion. In a large study, people were asked how much they had changed during the previous 10 years. They reported significant changes in their personalities, values, and preferences. But when they were asked how much they expect to change during the next 10 years, they predicted far less change. In other words, people could see that they had changed. They simply believed that most of the changing was now over, as if history has been moving until it reached them, as if the present version of themselves were finally complete. Young people believe it, middle-aged people believe it, older people believe it. The person changed, the illusion remained. This matters because your imagined future controls what you are willing to attempt today, right? When you say, I'm not technical, you may avoid learning how systems work. When you say, I'm not a leader, you may avoid, like situations that require leadership. When you say, I am bad at speaking, you avoid speaking. When you say, I have no discipline, you stop expecting disciplined behavior from yourself. Then your avoidance prevents you from collecting evidence. You do not practice, so you do not improve. Because you do not improve, the identity appears to be true. The statement creates the behavior creates the evidence, and the evidence strengthens the statement. The circle continues. It's like a loop. Let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I was terrible at English, right? For example, I remember I had very bad grades, and I was basically telling myself that, English is not my thing. I basically internalize it. And then one day I just decided that I'm going to improve my English. And that's basically what I did. I started having better grades, and I basically learned how to communicate in English. Obviously, my English is still not perfect, but I can communicate in English now, right? That's why I'm recording this video. If not, I wouldn't be able to record this video, and probably I would create content in Spanish, right? And I say in Spanish because some of you probably don't know about that, but I grew up in Barcelona, Spain. So my first language is basically Spanish. But that was just like a mindset shift. I just started believing that I can speak in English, and then I learned, and then I took the action basically to improve my English, and here we are. This is why you must be careful with the language you use to describe yourself. Your language does not only describe your identity, it can reinforce it, right? And I'm not talking about Spanish or English now, I'm talking about the language you use to communicate with yourself. For example, I'm bad at this sounds permanent. I have not developed this yet leaves the future open. I'm not confident becomes I do not have enough evidence yet, right? I'm not technical becomes I have avoided the technical side of the work until now. I'm not disciplined becomes my current behavior is inconsistent. I'm a procrastinator becomes I have developed a pattern of delaying uncomfortable work, right? These are not empty positive affirmations. You are not pretending to possess abilities you have not earned. You are describing the problem accurately without turning it into density, right? Do not lie to yourself, but do not sentence yourself either. There is an important difference between saying, I cannot do this, and saying, I cannot do this yet. The word yet does not guarantee success. It creates the possibility of development. And we saw that earlier in this course, right? But possibility alone is not enough. Time will change you, right? That is almost certain. The question, though, is whether you will shape that change intentionally. Because 10 years passing does not automatically make you wiser. Repeating the same year 10 times is not the same as 10 years of growth. Experience is not simply time. Experience is time combined with attention, reflection, correction, and repetition. You can spend 20 years protecting your weaknesses, or you can spend the next 2 years confronting them. You can allow your taste to become more refined while your execution remains unchanged. Or you can repeatedly place your execution under pressure of your taste. You can spend years, consuming information about design, or you can build the things that force that information to become ability. The future version of you is not waiting somewhere to be discovered. That person is being rehearsed now. Every repeated action is a vote for a future identity, not because one action transforms you, right? But because repetition creates evidence, and evidence makes an identity believable. I have created an exercise for this lesson called the identity audit. It will help you identify the limiting statements you repeatedly make about yourself, rewrite them more accurately, and decide what evidence could begin proving a different identity. You will find it inside the Module 1 exercises linked below this video. For now, remember this. You do not need to wait until you believe in your future self, right? Create evidence that make your future self easier to believe in. Your current identity is not something you must destroy overnight. It is something you can gradually outgrow. You are allowed to become unfamiliar to the person you are today, right? You are allowed to become more courageous, more patient, more capable, more technical, more articulate, more focused, more disciplined. But change will remain an idea unless something repeatedly carries you through the distance. That something is discipline. Lesson 1.16. Discipline is sweet. The word discipline is often presented as something harsh. It sounds like punishment, restriction, deprivation, doing things you hate, forcing yourself through life. But real discipline is not a punishment. It is a form of freedom because without discipline, you are controlled by whatever feeling happens to be strongest. You are basically controlled by distraction, by fear, by comfort, by other people's opinion, by the newest tool, by the newest trend, by the desire to avoid temporary discomfort. You might feel free because nobody's forcing you to do anything, right? But if you cannot direct your own attention, you are not free. If you cannot keep a promise to yourself, you are not free. If every notification can change your direction, you are not free. If every difficult emotion can stop the work, you are not free. Discipline is the ability to choose what matters and continue choosing it even after the excitement of that choice disappears. Intensity is easy to confuse with discipline. You become excited about a new goal. You work for 12 hours, right? You reorganize your life. You buy the new tools. You announce the plan, right? For several days, you feel unstoppable. Then intensity collapses. And because you cannot maintain that extreme pace, you assume you have failed. But intensity and discipline are not the same thing. Intensity is often powered by emotion, right? Discipline is what remains after the emotion leaves. Discipline is quieter, right? It is less impressive from the outside. It does not always produce a dramatic story. Discipline looks like doing the planned work on an ordinary Tuesday. It looks like continuing with the project after you have already shown everyone the exciting beginning. It looks like studying the fundamentals while other people chase shortcuts. It looks like revising something that is already good because you know it can become better. It is like returning after a bad week instead of using that week as evidence that you have failed permanently, right? That is why I say that discipline is sweet. At first, discipline can feel restrictive, right? But later it becomes peaceful. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop repeatedly deciding whether you are going to work. You stop carrying the weight of everything you know you should be doing, right? The decision has already been made. You know what matters. You know what the next step is, right? And then you just go and do it. Then, after doing all that, you can rest without carrying the same guilt. That is sweet. Keeping a promise to yourself is sweet. Completing something is sweet. Looking back at a body of work that exists because you kept going is sweet. The work itself may still be difficult, but difficulty and misery are not the same thing. Some of the most satisfying things you will ever do will require enormous effort. And that effort does not remove the satisfaction, it creates it, it amplifies it. For example, let's say you feel the urge to, just like dump scroll on social media and you don't do it. Let's say you feel the urge to eat junk food and you don't do it. Let's say you feel the urge to stay at home all day and not go to the gym, not work out, and not do anything. And you do it anyways. You just go to the gym, right? That is sweet. You know what I'm saying? That feeling of accomplishment is priceless. And every time you resist something that you know is a negative for you, maybe in the short term or the long term, when you resist that after the fact, you will feel good. But discipline is not self destruction, right? Discipline does not mean working every hour. It does not mean ignoring your health. It does not mean neglecting your family, right? It does not mean punishing yourself whenever life interrupts your plan. And it does not mean turning your career into your entire identity. Burnout is not proof of commitment. Exhaustion is not automatically evidence that you are doing meaningful work, right? Discipline should make your life more directed, right? Not chaotic. A disciplined person can work, but a disciplined person can also stop working. A disciplined person can protect time for family, for health, for worship, for thinking, right? For rest. Because discipline is not, simply the ability to say yes. It is also the ability to say no. No to opportunities that pull you away from your direction. No to projects you do not have the capacity to complete. No to tools that solve no important problem. No to the pressure to be visible every day. No to the belief that more activity always means progress, right? No to shiny objects. No to, unnecessary comparison. No to the fear that tells you to hide. Every meaningful yes will require many deliberate no's because when you say yes to one direction, you are also deciding which directions you are not going to follow. And that is not limitation, that is focus. And focus is one of the greatest gifts discipline can give you. But there is another part of discipline that people often ignore: your environment, right? Trying to overcome resistance through willpower alone is like playing the discipline game on hard mode. Every day you are asking yourself to fight the same battle again, right? Do not eat that, do not open that app, do not skip the gym, do not get distracted, do not procrastinate. You might win today, but tomorrow you have to fight the same battle again, right? And eventually your energy will be lower, your attention will be weaker, your emotions will be different, right? That is why discipline should not rely entirely on willpower. You should also design your environment to make the right action easier and the wrong action harder, right? If you want to stop eating junk food, for example, do not fill your kitchen with junk food and expect yourself to resist it every night. Just buy healthier food. Make the healthier option the easiest option available, right? If you want to go to the gym, for example, as well, prepare your clothes and shoes in advance. Put them somewhere visible. Then, when it's time to train, you do not need to search for anything. You do not need to decide what to wear. You just put the clothes on, take the bag, and go, right? Your environment has already completed part of the decision for you, right? If you want to stop mindlessly scrolling through social media, you do not need to keep every platform installed on your phone and expect yourself to resist it hundreds of times per day. Remove them. And if you need to publish something or send a message, install the app, do what you need to do, and then remove it again. That's what I do. Basically, add friction to the behavior you are trying to reduce, and then remove friction from the behavior you are trying to build. That is environmental discipline, right? Your environment is constantly influencing what you do, what is visible, what is easy to reach, what is already opened, what sends you notifications, what requires another decision. All of these things shape your behavior. So do not only ask, how can I become more disciplined, right? It is important, but you should also ask, how can I make discipline require less effort? You have to basically work hard and smart, right? So, how can I prepare the decision in advance? How can I make the right action obvious? How can I make distractions inconvenient, right? How can I stop depending on willpower every single time? A disciplined person does not deliberately surround themselves with, temptations just to prove that they can resist it, right? That is not the strength. That is unnecessary friction. Real discipline includes the humility to understand that your attention and energy are limited. So you have to protect them. You remove the apps, you prepare the clothes, you organize the workspace, you block the distracting websites, you keep the tools you need visible, you make the next action clear. Essentially, you design your environment so it supports the person you are trying to become. Because the easier the right behavior becomes, the less energy you waste fighting yourself. And that energy can be used for work that really matters. All this becomes even more important when working with artificial intelligence. AI can make many parts of the work faster. It can help you research, write, generate ideas, create images, prototype, code, organize information, and test different directions. It can remove friction from making, but it cannot remove the discipline required to become great, right? AI can generate 100 options. You still need a judgment to select one. AI can create a first draft. You still need patience to improve it. AI can help you build faster. You still need to know what deserves to be built. AI can make it easy to begin, but it cannot make you finish. It can provide information, but it cannot force the information to become understanding. It can produce output, right? But it cannot create your standards on your behalf, right? And the easier production becomes, the more valuable direction becomes, because abundance creates its own form of difficulty. When everything is possible, committing to one direction becomes harder. When every new tool promises transformation, staying with your current process becomes harder. That's basically part of the shiny object syndrome we talked about before, right? When you can generate endlessly, deciding that something is complete becomes harder. This is where discipline becomes even more important, right? You need discipline to stop generating and start deciding. The discipline to refine, one direction instead of endlessly exploring. Obviously, that one direction should be good. That's why taste, judgment, and understanding are very important. You need the discipline to reject work that looks impressive but does not solve the problem. The discipline to finish, right? The future will not belong only to the people with access to the best tools. Many people will have access to the same tools. The advantage will belong to the people who can direct them, right? People who can think, people who can decide, people who can maintain standards, right? People who can stay with a difficult problem, right? People who can finish. This is the real relationship between AI and discipline. AI can reduce friction, but discipline gives the work direction. AI can increase your speed, but discipline determines whether that speed takes you somewhere meaningful. So, discipline is not about forcing yourself through life, right? It is about building a life in which the things that matter are easier to continue. It is choosing your direction before your emotions choose it for you. It is designing your environment so you don't have to fight the same unnecessary battle every day, right? It is knowing when to say yes, also having the courage to say no. It is using powerful tools without allowing those tools to control your attention. It is returning when you lose momentum and finishing after the excitement of the beginning disappears. At first, discipline may feel like restriction, right? But over time, it becomes freedom. Freedom from a constant negotiation with yourself, freedom from distraction, freedom from depending on motivation, freedom from repeatedly breaking promises to yourself. That is why discipline is sweet, because discipline allows you to become someone you can trust, and becoming someone you can trust changes everything. Before we close module 1, I want you to complete 3 exercises. Watching these lessons is not enough, right? You need to turn the ideas into an honest assessment of where you are, a clear picture of where you are going, and practical decisions about who you need to become. You will find the exercise templates linked below this video. The first exercise is called the director audit. This exercise will help you identify how you currently approach projects. It looks at what you already take responsibility for, where your responsibility currently stops, and which behavior would move you closer to directing the complete outcome. Do not choose the answer that sounds more impressive. Choose the answer that is supported by the way you actually work today. If you are a complete beginner, that is fine. You can answer from personal projects, course assignments, redesigns, practice briefs, or simply the way you currently approach learning and making. The objective is not to give yourself a flattering label, right? The objective is to establish an honest starting point. The second exercise is called Design the Life You Are Building. This is a direction board exercise. You will collect images that make your desired future emotionally visible. The work you want to create, the freedom you want, the environment you want to live and work in, the relationships you want to protect, the experiences you want to have, the material success you want to achieve, and basically the way you want your life to feel. And be completely honest about what you want. Do not censor the board to make it appear sensible, modest, or impressive to someone else. The emotional response matters, right? But the exercise does not end with the images. You will look beneath them and ask what they actually represent. Then you decide what direction those desires imply. And you will also name what you are unwilling to sacrifice in order to reach them. The third exercise is called Design Your Future Self. This exercise focuses on the person capable of building that life. You will create a collage using 4 to 6 people or characters who represent qualities you want to develop. They may be designers, artists, athletes, founders, historical figures, personal mentors, people you know, or fictional characters. Do not choose them only because they are famous or successful. Here is an example of my own board, right? And the characters here basically inspire me in a way or another, right? So use it as inspiration to build your own. Choose them because you can identify a specific quality in the way they work, they behave, they decide, or respond under pressure. Then use the worksheet to translate those qualities into observable behavior. Not vague words, not motivation. I'm talking about actual behavior. You will decide what each quality should look like in your own life, where you will practice it, what evidence would prove that you practiced it, and how you can adapt your environment to make that behavior easier, right? Because the collage is not the final outcome, the evidence is. Once you have completed the future self exercise, I want you to share the collage in the Web Designers Collective community. It's a private web design community where you will find other designers following the course. If you are not a member yet, you can join by going to webdesignerscollective.com/join. It's free. All you have to do is go there and apply. After you join, in the post, include the 3 qualities you selected. The figure who represents each quality, why each quality matters to you, and one behavior you will practice during the next 30 days. You do not need to share the private reflection sections from any of the worksheets, okay? Those are for you. Share the collage and the commitment. Keep the deeper personal reflection private. So, the action item is to complete all three exercises before moving into Module 2. The director audit will show you where you are. Design the life you are building will help you define where you are going. And design your future self will help you decide who you need to become in order to get there. Current reality, desired direction, and then required transformation. That is the work of Module 1. In Module 2, we are going to look at what AI is actually changing. Not only what it can produce, but what becomes common, what becomes valuable, and what now separates acceptable work from exceptional work. AI is raising the floor, but it's also raising the ceiling. And once you see that shift clearly, you will understand why the future belongs to designers who can direct and not only produce. This is the final conceptual bridge before we move into the practical and technical part of the course. After Module 2, we'll start building real websites, real web apps, right? And the systems behind them. But before we start building, you need to understand what AI has made easier, what it has made less valuable, and where your advantage now comes from. This is the perceptual flip. All right, so I will see you in Module 2.